Stand by.
Okay.
That is muted. Okay, and we are live.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. It is Wednesday, April 13th, 2022. This is the regular meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners. We're live streaming this meeting on YouTube, and also it is recorded and made available on the county website afterward. And we want to acknowledge, we are well aware we had some audio challenges last week. It was the first time we met in person in 2 years, and also the first time we introduced the hybrid format of having people both in this room and able to speak over the Zoom format. Our PIO, Mr. Miller, is trying a new microphone setup today. And again, just want everybody to be aware. We are aware of the problems. We are working on them. Commissioner Doug Hunt has an excused absence today. However, Commissioner Jacobson and I constitute a quorum of the board, and we will move forward on our business for today. First off, I want to welcome the man to my right, our brand new county administrator, Tim Johnson. Tim has had a lifetime of service in public administration, most recently with the city of Federal Way, Washington. Tim's an Oregon native, and he says he's delighted to be back home. Although county administrator is a new title in our organizational chart, it's really not a new position. For more than 30 years, our previous county council, Wayne Belmont, performed the duties of the job without the title. When Wayne retired last year, we decided to split the administrative function from the county council positions. We commissioners have given Tim some ambitious marching orders with project management duties at the top of the list. In the next several years, we're looking at building a new animal shelter, a new emergency operations center, redevelopment of the county commons, and other potential projects. Tim also has a strong economic development background and will put his skills to work with other public and private partners working on job retention and job creation. Tim's also going to tackle long-range strategic planning. Although some of our departments have good strategic plans, we do not yet have a county-wide plan. Commissioner Jacobson, anything you'd like to say in welcoming Tim?
I just wanted to say welcome, Tim, to your first BOC meeting, and we're happy to have you, and looking forward to the added capacity to work on capital projects and other stuff, and just a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Look forward to meeting everyone.
Anything else you'd like to add? Not right now.
Not right now.
Yeah, you're still finding your way around the building, but he's learning quickly, and I too am very enthusiastic to have him on board. Next up is adoption of the consent calendar. These are routine items like approval of meeting amendments, meeting minutes, renewal of various contractual agreements and the like. And is there anything that staff or Commissioner Jacobson would like to highlight or remove from the consent
Well, I
calendar?
have a question.
Okay.
If I may. So G1 and H1, it looks like they're the same thing, but one says amendment number 1 and one says amendment number 2.
They are different.
Oh,
So
okay.
we signed the first amendment a couple of weeks ago and it was returned to us cited by OHA. In that time, there has been a second amendment that just needs our execution.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'd entertain a motion then for approval of the consent calendar as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve our consent calendar as it is presented.
I second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We don't have a public hearing or a decision and action item. So we move to discussion and information items, and Assistant County Counsel Jerry Herbage is on the Zoom line, and we're asking him today to report into us on the recent Newport City Council meeting and their action on our conditional use permit application for the animal shelter site. Jerry?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So as you indicated, I am Jerry Herbage. I'm an assistant county counsel working under County Counsel Kristen Ewell. And today I'm going to talk just about one thing, and that has to do with the Lincoln County's conditional use application for an animal shelter and storage buildings at the Newport Municipal Airport. So I'm going to actually start with the application and talk a little bit about the Planning Commission and then the City Council meeting. So with the assistance of architect Chris Keene and his team of professionals, on December 22nd, 2021, the county completed and submitted a land use application for a conditional use permit at the animal shelter. It also included storage buildings. This all on a 5-acre parcel at the Newport Municipal Airport. For those of you who want to know, the address is 110 Southeast 84th Street in Newport, Oregon. What makes this a little bit different is that the parcel is owned by the city of Newport. And so in order to make this work, the county and city executed an MOU. An MOU means a memorandum of understanding, to reflect the understanding between the parties that there was an interest in the county entering a lease with the city to make this possible. In terms of the MOU, it should be noted that it is not binding, but it is a statement of intent that the parties will work together. In terms of the application, consider just the following. The animal shelter is under the department or the office of the sheriff. So it's under the authority of Curtis Landers in that regard. The manager of the animal shelter is Sarah Weinveen, who's present today. Project manager is Steve Hodge. Our new county administrator, who was recently introduced, is Tim Johnson, and the commissioners have overall authority over county operations, including this project. Now let's briefly look at the application so people know what was applied for and some of the circumstances regarding the application. When we filed, this was given a case file number 7 CUP 21. This was for development on property zoned P1. P1 means public structures. It's also in the airport restricted area and airport development zone overlay. So those are additional overlay zones. In terms of the public structures, this application is an outright use, but because it's in the airport restricted area, it becomes a conditional use. When we submitted the application, it included a site plan with exterior elevations, a floor plan, and so on. And that was done with the assistance of our architect, Chris Keene. The development would be in 2 phases. First, phase 1, let's say, would be construction of the shelter. The application is for up to a 12,000 square foot building, space for 24 dogs, as kennel space for 24 dogs and 59 cats. Would include a public reception area, sales of basic and pet care needs, and so on, staffing area, 3 private offices, a sally port, animal receiving area where animals could be examined, grooming facilities, clinic space, and outdoor exercise areas. So I mentioned the phase one. Obviously, that means that there's a phase two. Phase two would be construction of storage facilities of up to 10,000 square feet and possibly spay neuter clinic within the animal shelter. Because it's a conditional use, there's criteria for approval. And there were 4 criteria that we addressed: that the public facilities can adequately accommodate the proposed use, that the request complies with the requirements of the underlying zone or overlay zone. And then number 3 is the proposed use does not have an adverse impact greater than existing uses on nearby properties, where impacts can be ameliorated through imposition of conditions of approval. And lastly, number 4, a proposed building or building modification is consistent with the overall development character of the neighborhood with regard to building size and height, considering both existing buildings and potential buildings allowable as uses permitted outright. So we address those criteria. If the board has any questions, we can get into that. Let's just go through the process a bit, and we'll conclude here shortly. After the application was filed, the city set a hearing before the Planning Commission. That's in concert with their rules in their code. And that hearing was on January 24th, 2022. Notice went out to over 100 property owners and was published. Staff report was done. And the staff report said the proposal can satisfy the approval criteria for conditional use, provided conditions are imposed as outlined. At that time, there were 9 conditions. But it said, accordingly, staff, that's Derek Tokos, recommends that the commission approve the request subject to conditions. So we had the hearing before the Planning Commission. Chris Keene, Sheriff Landers, and I gave evidence in support of the application or testimony. There was a lot of written material that had been submitted. A couple of people testified against the, but only a couple, given all the notice that went out. That was interesting. A couple of people testified against the application, including Dan McCray, who later became the appellant. And no one asked that the record be left open or that the matter be continued. The record was closed, and the Planning Commission deliberated there on the 24th of January. And a motion was made to approve the application subject to conditions, and the motion passed. But in land use, you don't have a decision or a final decision until it's reduced to writing. So this was scheduled for February 14th as the date for adoption of findings and final written order. The commission convened as scheduled and approved written findings and a final order. And this was subject to 10 conditions now. The new one is that livestock and other animals that cannot be boarded entirely within the animal shelter building shall not be located on the premises unless a state of emergency has been declared by federal, state, or local authorities. So in other words, it had a provision that if emergency was declared, large animals, if absolutely necessary, could be housed there at the animal shelter, but only for the length of the declaration. And so that was the added 10th condition. So notice of the decision went out, and an appeal was filed by Dan McCray. So on March 7th, the city council convened to determine just one issue. Would the appeal hearing be de novo, or would it be on the record? So let's just briefly explain that. De novo means entirely new hearing. I think that's a little bit of Latin there. And the on the record means it'd be like a court of appeals hearing or something. It's just based solely on the record that was already in place. And based on the criteria that the city has, the city council voted that it would be on the record. So the city has a procedure where briefs are filed. And on March 14th, Dan McCray, the appellant, submitted the appellant's brief. On March 21st, I submitted a response brief. And then the city prepared a staff report again. And what is interesting is in the staff report, the city again recommended approval of the project and said that it complied with the conditions, the 4 criteria, but it would need to be approved with the conditions of approval, the 10 that were previously approved. So the hearing before the city council was on April 4th. City council convened at 6 o'clock. There was some other business, but eventually we got to this matter. They held a hearing on the appeal. The appellant, Dan McCray, presented his case. Animal shelter manager Sarah Weinveen and I represented the county at the hearing. I made argument based on my brief. City council deliberated, and it was by a 5-2 vote. They denied the appeal and approved the application. As I said before, it's not complete until final written order is approved, and the matter is scheduled for a it's scheduled before the city council to approve the final order on April 18th. And that's all within 120 days. The city had 120 days to process this matter. And, you know, basically at the hearing, we argued what was in the brief, that the county had complied with the conditions, that there were separate issues of whether or not the lease would be executed or not, but that the goal posts were very low. It was there were fairly de minimis requirements to in place for approval of this, and that we had met them. That was our argument. So I hope I wasn't too long-winded, but if the board has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jerry. I don't have any more questions about the process, but I am interested in the status of where we're at with discussions with the city about an actual property lease, which I assume is the next step if we are going to continue on this path for this property.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that that is an important aspect of the process.
And what is the status of those lease discussions?
I perhaps someone else could answer that better than me. After the hearing, Derek Tokos asked me what was the county's position on the lease itself. And I got back with him and indicated that our new county administrator, Tim Johnson, and Kristen Ewell would be in touch with Spencer Neville on the issue, and left it at that.
Anything you would like to add, Council Ewell?
Kristen Ewell, County Council. So Commissioners, this is an opportunity for you to have a discussion on how you want to proceed with this project. Right now, the final approval needs to be done for the conditional use. As Mr. Urbridge indicated, that will be done on April 18th. And then the next steps would be to discuss lease negotiations.
If my memory is correct, I understand that former County Council Belmont did have some discussions with the city about potential terms for a lease, but nothing had been committed to writing yet.
And I believe they had a study done or something looking at potential cost.
Correct.
Right,
So but the
Okay.
first step in the process was a conditional use permit.
yes.
And then the next step would be to finalize the lease.
Okay, Commissioner Jacobson, any questions for Mr. Herbage?
No questions, thank you, Council Urbich. I guess in having our broader discussion, which I think we're getting ready to have, maybe it might be nice to have Sheriff Landers join us, and I don't
Yes.
think our shelter manager is here. Oh, she's online, okay.
Oh,
great.
okay.
All right, hello.
Hi,
Yes.
Sarah. Sheriff Landers, thanks for being with us for this discussion.
Yes, good morning, Sheriff Hall, Commissioner Jacobson, for the record, Curtis Landers, Lincoln County Sheriff. And I guess before we get going, I am so glad to be back sitting in this seat in front of you again.
Yeah.
On
Been
the
a couple of
screen.
years.
So, yeah, it's been a couple of years. So it's good we can have these discussions in person again. So, yeah,
Can't hear.
Oh, we're having a hearing?
okay.
Can't hear.
Trying to get close because I was one of the ones that probably said the audio wasn't good last time because I was on the video. So, and I knew it was people going in and out of the mic. So is that better?
No, she's
No?
saying no.
Casey, what's the status of the room speakers?
We can probably try to turn it up a little.
Let's try it.
Yeah, I was
Mike?
concerned about running into feedback problems, but let's see.
Barb, another thing you can do is, if necessary, jump back a couple seats where the speaker comes out. Try that, Curtis.
Test, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, that's better. I hear that. It's okay.
that's good. Good.
Didn't hear twisting either.
What do you try?
Test. I don't know if they were on.
Very
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Very
Yeah,
good.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Sheriff?
Oh, you want me to begin? Okay.
Yeah, I think that from our standpoint, we're interested in your perspectives on this process. And also, I'd like to hear, from shelter staff, they're in the temporary shelter we set up a couple of years ago, how operations are going there and,
So,
yeah, anything else you'd like to share?
sure. These are my thoughts and opinions on the topic. First of all, I'd like to thank all that have been involved in this process, that have done a lot of work in going through these steps to determine the location for the shelter, and also all the steps to take to adequately make sure we have all the conditions in place for the shelter. Specifically, Council Urbridge has done a tremendous amount of work, done great work. Derek Tokos was mentioned for the city, has helped us a lot. So I just want to thank them, the city, and all that's been involved in this. I know that Animal Shelter Director Weinbein, we've had this conversation about it. We know the most important thing is to get an animal shelter for our animals, for the citizens, and specifically for our team members at the animal shelter, because it's been a long time since they had a permanent building and been in a temporary location. Temporary, that has been a long time. We all know that temporary didn't have a set date, and getting them the animal shelter that our community needs, deserves, and desires, I think is very important to this process. Given that, and we know that the issues that have been brought up at the airport, I've listened, I've been part of the city council meetings, I've been part of the planning commission meetings, and all the issues raised obviously are important. And without getting into who's right, who's wrong on the issues, whether or not the process would go all the way through, and we have a lease, I think the most important thing is having public support behind this project. And I think that is one of the most important things that we need, because this is something that is, again, so valuable to our community. It's been shown from clear back to the election when the Animal Services District was formed on the voters for the 11 cents a thousand the voters paid for this, and how overwhelmingly that passed. That the community supports our animals in our community, and really wants a shelter they can be proud of. I do too. So given that, and the process went through with our partners, some of them are in the audience today. It is my opinion that we need to, however you want to look at it, pause, hold, not continue in the forward process of the animal shelter at its intended location. I will say for one, I've never given up on other locations. I think that even when this was going through, we didn't know if we were going to get a conditional use permit. We didn't know if we were going to get a lease with the city. So it was always in the back of my mind that if another property came up, that we would explore it. Obviously, once an entity like county goes through and starts processing, I think our options start going down. We don't have exposure to those. So I think saying that we're going to pause this and move forward, maybe there will be other opportunities that will exist. Again, it's going to have a setback for our staff as far as timeliness moving forward. But I hope it also goes with partnerships and support from our partners that we so much needed and value in moving forward. I think that no matter what site we pick, as we look through these, there'll probably be some opposition, but I think this one having as much opposition as it has doesn't show a lot of public support. And I think that is, again, much needed in wherever property we decide to further evaluate and consider for the animal shelter moving forward. Thank you.
You basically said what I was going to say. So
Yeah.
you took the words right out of my mouth. And I want to be careful that we're not saying pausing on an animal shelter, because we're absolutely not. But I would say that, pause on pursuing a lease agreement and aggressively pursue other options. I will say that my preference has always been to purchase something rather than lease. Especially from the city, because council members change or needs of the airport changes or whatever. So I'm going to read what our original kind of citing criteria was. I think that might be helpful as we hopefully look at some alternatives, just to remind everybody what we were looking for to begin with. So as I said, purchase is Katie's personal preference, but a lease would be an option. Out of the tsunami zone was a big one for us, because we felt like in a disaster, we have a very caring, animal loving community, and we don't want people running into the tsunami zone and trying to get the animals out. It's also a large investment to put into a tsunami zone. Zoning, there's a variety of zoning that could potentially work with conditional use, but residential will not work. So we can't be in an R1, we can't be in an R2 or an RR1. Industrial, commercial, semi-industrial could work. And my understanding is AC and TC could potentially work as well, could work. I think an acre that's completely flat would be a complete bare minimum if all the space was usable, but even that would be tight. Probably a minimum of 2 usable acres would be better and represent room for growth. The site itself needs to be accessible to the public, and I guess what we went through the first time we cited is things like not being able to make a left and right hand turn in and out of the property because of ODOT rules, or having to drive 8 miles on a single lane gravel road or something like that, where technically you can get to it, but it's not real user friendly in terms of trying to get to that site. And this is the Lincoln County Animal Shelter, so we'd be looking anywhere in Lincoln County, not just in Newport. Utility wise, it's obviously preferable to have utilities already at the site, but we may be able to bring utilities in depending on how far away they would be or something like that. And septic may or may not be possible, those need to be evaluated. The other thing I would say, and I've had several emails with groups, trying to look for alternatives, is we have had situations in the past where word got out, not with the animal shelter necessarily, but word got out that the county was looking at a particular piece of property and someone swooped in and purchased that and then tried to price gouge us and sell it back to us for more. It's also just a very competitive real estate market right now, I think, as we all know. So if someone thinks they hear of something or knows of something, please reach out to myself or Sheriff Landers or Tim or Commissioner Hall, so that we can try to look at that and get it evaluated. And I would just say I would appreciate it not going on social media or not being talked about a whole lot, because then that opportunity for someone else to snag it might be there, and it is a very competitive market at this point. So that's just kind of what we're looking for in terms of the shelter site. Like I said, there is a lot of potential variables in there, but we also have had realtors that are working on this and still working on this. And my opinion is that As far as finding an alternative, it may not be something that has a for sale sign posted in it. It may be somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who has a site that they would be willing to sell for this purpose. So I think the network kind of being deployed and helping us look would be helpful in that.
Great. Do we want to hear from our shelter manager? Does she have anything to add to this conversation? Sarah?
Good morning, Animal Shelter Manager Sarah Wangbean. I am sorry I couldn't be there in person. I really wanted to, but we had some staffing requirements that left me here at the shelter. So I want to thank you so much for your time, for everyone's time on this. I can speak for myself and for the staff. We are definitely concerned with the recent public interest in the welfare of the animals in regards to the airport location. And we take that very seriously. I would just like to assure the commissioners and the county as a whole that your team here at the animal shelter is an incredible group of professionals that take the most incredible care of the animals at the shelter every day, no matter what building we're in, no matter what situation we're in. The temporary facility definitely added some challenges that the team has risen to. We have not had to adjust the care of the animals. We've just had to adjust the level of service we're able to offer our community. So of course, what is required by law, we still provide, but you know, we have fewer spots for animals to come in. So sometimes the waiting list is a little longer because we're not going to compromise the care of the animals over anything else. So same level of care, and wherever we end up, we will provide that level of care. And we're excited at the possibility of having a new shelter, something state of the art, something that is built for the purpose, so that we can offer that high level of service that that the county came to expect from us. COVID has definitely opened our minds to possibilities for providing service without people having to come to the shelter. We have learned that there are ways to get animals to people and people to animals without necessarily coming to one site. So I think that has opened up a lot more possibilities when it comes to other locations other than really centralized. So again, I want to thank everyone for their time and their input, and your shelter team. We're committed to the care of the animals and service to our community, and no matter where we are, we're gonna provide that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mike, oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, please.
I was just gonna look at council you and say, do we need a formal motion to put a pause on the lease agreement, or do we just have consensus between
No,
the two of
it's
us?
just a discussion.
Okay.
Although I think I would be in favor later on of, yeah, because we do have this as discussion information that we could take action. I would be in support also of a motion to pause the lease negotiations with the city while we explore other sites, potential other sites. And again, we aren't going to announce the site in advance because of exactly the problem Commissioner Jacobson raised. Somebody else could swoop in, buy the property, and then try to price gouge it. It's happened to us before. It's happened to a lot of other government agencies. I appreciate the public sentiment that has been presented these last few months. Just want to remind everybody that this was a lengthy process that led to the selection of the airport site. Commissioner Jacobson was on that committee. Sheriff, you were on it, weren't you? Yes. And the animal shelter manager at the time, community animal interest groups. And well, I am enthusiastically in support of searching other potential locations. You know, it's difficult there. I think those aren't excessive criteria, 2 usable acres, good public access, necessary utilities and zoning. But the fact is, there just aren't that many properties that fit that on the market. Let's see, several people have contacted me and asked why we've ruled out the current shelter site. And the basic problem there is there's no room for expansion. That there is a open ground adjacent to the current shelter that we allow to be used mainly as a soccer practice field. But I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, in a rather intense rainstorm, a sinkhole opened up on that property. And they never did find the bottom of the sinkhole. They dug down quite a ways. There were rooted tree roots still there, old tires, chain link fencing. So, that closes off really the ability to do redevelopment at that site. Some people have contacted me suggesting that the King Salvage site could be used. Well, there are a lot of problems with that. For one thing, it's in the tsunami zone, but I don't know, maybe not everyone is aware. That's a Superfund cleanup site, a brownfield that we have been working in coordination with the state DEQ on cleanup of that property. And, thousands of tires have been removed from the site, dozens, maybe hundreds of junked motor vehicles of all kind. But there is still probably 30 or more years of gasoline, oil, and solvents that have soaked into the property there, and the scraping of the property will take place, but DEQ says they have no idea how long that would take. And also, I really don't feel it's good to put the shelter on a brownfield.
Yeah, additionally, I would say with that site that we have additional money coming in for DEQ for cleanup, but one thing that may happen is that DEQ could put deed restrictions on the type of use that you could use that property for. So even after cleanup, we're not sure, what exactly it would be able to be used for. My guess is it's probably gonna have, trees planted in and go back to being timber. So it may not even be able to be signed off on for that type of project when we are done.
Sure.
Just some maybe final thoughts from me on the matter. Again, thank you for considering this. I think it's important. I think it's difficult once momentum is started in a project to pull back, because if you look at the site without everything that all these other external influences that go in there, it's a nice piece of property out at the airport, and I think that's what a lot of us saw. Again, with Commissioner Jacobson, I never really, the lease was one thing that I knew was going to be ongoing cost, and after that study, quite considerable cost for the animal shelter, which we know the Animal Services District really can't afford or would rather prioritize for other things. I'm hoping with this consensus decision, whatever we call it, that our partners will now really get behind us again, really start looking for a good piece of property and vetting that out appropriately like we did for this one. I did have the opportunity to speak with Mr. McCray, Dan McCray, prior to this meeting. He was unable to be here today. Kind of let him know my thoughts that I was going to present at the meeting to you. And I thanked him for his passion and involvement in this. A lot of times we don't hear people from our community come out and do this. So we really appreciate that when somebody does do that, because sometimes we do get caught, our blinders get on, and we know we just need a great shelter for our team and staff, and find a great property and want to continue moving forward and the momentum. So it's good to have that input. He said he's committed with that to help us when he's available to really work with us to get us a property that we need. And really, I guess what I'd like to say is just channel all this energy into a common goal that we can all work on together.
And I had sent in the site criteria yesterday.
He
as
mentioned
well,
that.
so,
He wanted me to thank you for that. So.
I guess the last thing I would say to our shelter manager, and you kind of alluded to this, but as again, kind of open back up that search and look for additional sites. And again, not just in Newport, but we're looking at the whole county. I think looking at what type of plan we would have to, again, do more services in the rest of the county, which I think is something that, you know, there's certainly room to improve on, regardless of where the actual location is. I think it'd be nice to start working on a plan on wherever we're at, how we serve the places that we're not in. I think there's certainly some models that other communities use, whether it be an adoption ban or events or whatever in different places that help get those services out.
Okay, Commissioner, I think we have definitely reached a consensus here, but I'd like to get a motion on record just to give direction to staff, make sure it's part of the record. Would you like to craft something?
Sure, yeah, sure, I'll walk my way through that. I make a motion that we pause on pursuing a lease agreement with the city of Newport for the animal shelter for 60 days and aggressively pursue other siting options. Make a friendly amendment.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
like to make a friendly amendment that it'd be at least a 120-day pause, so that we really have time to pursue and vet any other potential sites. Are you comfortable with that?
I'm okay with that. I'm kind of looking at Sheriff Landers and Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of how many days you put on it, you always have the option to come back and extending that if you need to. But I think maybe with the shortened timeline, it kind of gets us more aggressively looking. And that's where I like to go, so have that optimistic thoughts that we're going to find something sooner than later.
Do you want to
So-
split it and say 90? Would
Sure.
that- I think that
Yeah.
gives us the push
Okay.
maybe.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so friendly amendment to 90 days.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote then. I vote aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all very much. And we move on now to reports, and Commissioner Jacobson with our monthly wildfire report.
Yes, let me flip there, and actually PIO Miller might be assisting as well. So I think it's been over a month since we've had a wildfire recovery update, and just want to say that for those of you that haven't been up to Otis in a while, there are many homes back there. We're about we lost about 300 homes, and we have almost half of those properties are somewhere in the permitting process. So we are about halfway through, even though that doesn't mean half of the homes are back. They're somewhere in that process moving forward. So it's looking really good, and it's really been a lot of hard work from the community and volunteers and property owners. So we haven't been there in a while ago. Go take a look. So just kind of some updates on what's happening. One of the things that came out of the Echo Mountain fire was the need for a long-term recovery group, or LTRG for short. There's other communities that already have long-term recovery groups. It's sort of a piece of emergency management that helps with kind of the recovery end and helping survivors. And so from this disaster, we formed our first long-term recovery group. We have been up and running for several months now. But as of yesterday, they now have their own executive director. So that's very exciting. It was kind of housed under Lucinda with Habitat, but now they have received some funding and can have their own executive director, not just to keep responding to this wildfire, but also to do long-term planning for how they respond to additional emergencies in the past, and are connecting with emergency management to get the group trained. So that's very exciting, and we are working with them on giving them some of the state funding we have received to give to them to be able to continue that executive director positions. As for housing pieces, people that are now housed or have been housed in the FEMA trailers that are on tribal land, that was supposed to be done in March of this year. We were successful in asking for an extension. We put in a request. The state helped carry that for us. And so there was a successful extension on that. However, in that extension, people living in those trailers now have to pay rent for living there. However, we have had a pretty high, I think about a 40% success rate in appeal process for those people. So getting a reduction or a complete waiver of rent. So legal aid has been helping with that as well as volunteers. So pretty good success rate on getting that rent down for people in there. We also now have our disaster case managers up and going. Every fire survivor qualifies for a disaster case manager. And if you don't have a disaster case manager, you can call 411 and you'll be assigned a disaster case manager that can basically help you navigate through resources and connect you with stuff. You can also talk to staff or volunteers at the San Robert Grange or the Haven, which is the hotel that is still sheltering people, and they can help you walk through that process of getting a disaster case manager as well. There was a home loan forgiveness program that the state just put out maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. It was for manufactured homes for survivor. It was home loan forgiveness, so essentially a grant for survivors. That process for survivors applying was tedious and cumbersome and very difficult. We were working on trying to get some volunteers that are, paperwork savvy, retired attorneys, or people that kind of have experience doing that to maybe help survivors with that. And then the state has actually paused that program and said they're going to make revisions and make it easier, which is good. But I'm just putting it out there that we still might need some, like I said, paperwork savvy volunteers to kind of help with that application process when it's put back out. That is not something that disaster case managers can usually do. So we might need some community people to help with that. We do have which I've talked about previously, we have a project moving forward for fire survivors that are on fixed income, so mostly seniors. And these are federal disaster tax credits, which came to the state, which Commissioner Howell voted on, and came to Lincoln County Housing Authority. So that project is moving forward, and they have selected their consultant, and I believe have property purchased in Lincoln City to be building that project. Additionally, there's a couple of tiny home projects that the state is trying to move forward on, 2, potentially 3 of those, and they have purchased property for one or in the middle of that. One set of properties actually already owned by a potential nonprofit partner in the city, and then they're looking for a third site as well. And those would be basically, I don't want to say temporary housing, maybe interim housing and a way to get people out of hotels, because the state at some point will stop paying for hotel sheltering. And so the idea with the tiny homes is to be able to move people out of hotels into these tiny home villages. Let's see, also on funding that I wrote grants for infrastructure. We're still waiting for state contracts, but we still have money going to Panther Creek Water District. So they're receiving about $11 million that was funded in the Christmas tree bill 2 sessions ago, but we had to make a title change fix on it this session. So hopefully they will get that. And that is to both rebuild their water system. And then we are using technical assistance from the federal government to look at people around the water system to assess homeowners or people that are vulnerable to not having water because of increased drought conditions and pull them into that district. And then finally, we have received our money for road repair from ODOT. That was a hard fought battle to get money for road repair. And so we are basically ready to go, but waiting for it to dry out slightly before we start putting gravel down. So hopefully in the next 6 weeks, just depending on whether there will be some visible road improvement. And we got the state to agree that we can use this money for public access roads, which are roads that the public maintains. They're not owned by us or owned by a road district. And those are the roads that are kind of in the worst shape. So like I said, in another 4 to 6 weeks, depending on whether there should be some visible progress there. And Casey, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure. Let me point the camera down here.
Yourself, yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you, Katie. You know, you really took the community, you know, under your wing in recovery, and it's made such a tremendous difference. But on top of all that recovery stuff, we really are moving into our Cascadia Rising exercise. So that can be a lot to process, especially for our fire survivors to also think about preparation. One of the things you didn't mention was the distribution of those go bags. And, you know, that's just a good reminder to not only our fire survivors, but the community. This Cascadia Rising exercise is really an opportunity to think about, you know, what we can do to not be in this situation. And if we do find ourselves in another wildfire or tsunami or disaster, to really think about our personal plan and preparation. So be on the lookout for those wildfire presentations that come at this time through emergency management. And really, this Cascadia Rising exercise is massive. It is a huge undertaking that brings together multi-jurisdictional partners, but what it means is that we are working on being ready. We can work together as a community. It's a whole community approach. And we'll be better prepared. So stay on the lookout. There's already information online about this, about how anyone can participate, and especially our coordination with other entities. So it's good news for us. It means we're going to be prepared, but it's something that we always have to continue to work at. So.
And we were inviting our newly formed long-term recovery group to that event too,
Yeah.
so they can be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, it is really cool to see the long-term recovery group you know, balance and move into the future of being there for the next situation. I've done a tremendous job at helping North County recover, and that continues. And now they're beginning to explore what that group means for the community moving forward. And with that, I would say there is information on our website. You can look for a long-term recovery group. We are looking and would like to recruit you know, new people to participate into the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I would also add, with a room full of animal advocates in the room,
Yes.
that we do not
Yes.
have any animal advocates in our long-term recovery
Yes.
group. And obviously for people going through disasters, that is, you know, something that needs support. So maybe there's some volunteers.
Good recommendation.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Casey. Yeah.
Okay, we'll move to commissioner reports. Do you have anything else to share, Commissioner?
And nothing else to report. Thank you.
And I don't have a report this week. So now we're into public comment time, and Mr. Miller, will you be acting as our timekeeper again?
Well, yes.
Okay.
And let me
Or
see.
Asia, are you set up to
Casey,
do that
you need
again?
I do have the
a few
timer
minutes?
set up.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
well, I think we're okay.
Okay.
I see one person virtually here, Kathy, so use the raise hand function. If you want to talk, my guess is she isn't, that's actually my mom.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah,
Was there any smart sheet input in the last week?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Would
so,
we like to acknowledge that?
I don't know.
I can get my dad to come, I guess.
Yeah,
It's very
I-
urgent
from her.
meeting day.
Okay, so what we're gonna do here real quickly is we're going to take a look. So our public input for the week. It's here somewhere, hang in there. Okay, so if you go to the website. Well, we have public input online, so stand by and I'll see if I can find it for you. I thought I had it pulled up, but. Yes, okay. So when we go to the county's website and we go into the meeting for the week, you can see the public input that we've received. Asia processed that this morning, and it is online, and it looks like we've got 5 pages, maybe not 5, oh, 4. Okay, 4 different pieces of input online.
And the commissioners do, of course, review all input through the smart sheet, and always appreciate it. So now we will move to apparently Your mom didn't raise her hand, so she's not interested in public input
It
today.
doesn't look like it.
No,
So I'll
so,
hear from her.
so we do have in-person public comment and we have the sign-up sheet. We'll just remind everybody that input is limited to 3 minutes per person. Okay, thank you. James Hanselman.
You get which sheet we use?
Yeah, that's good right there. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Thank you, Commissioner Jacobson. My name is James Hanselman. I'm a resident of Newport. And also, to be fair, I am a Newport planning commissioner. I am one who voted on these proposals with the animal shelter, and that's what I will address today. I will remind and bring to the forefront one of my greatest concerns about animal shelters that I support through work, donations, as my wife does. The animals housed at shelters have already been failed by humans. They are neglected animals, abused animals, and animals that are no longer wanted. They've had their time with humans, and in the most part, they've been failed. As a planning commissioner, when our hearings were held and all of the information was provided to me, I suffered mightily, and I initially voted for the proposal that was brought before us. And that is mostly because of what I felt was my obligation. The proposal had met the 4 criteria for a non-conforming permit. But in my 3+ years on the planning commission, I have learned that these criteria that we are used, and only those 4 criteria that we were allowed to use, are often circumspect and they don't cover everything. And in fact, in this case, they said nothing about animals. It is all about humans. Who will suffer? The neighbors, et cetera, what kind of economic issues? This isn't animals, and yet those are the organisms, the living beings that have the most to lose. So I initially voted for the proposal because that was my role, and they did fit the criteria. However, after I voted, I was so uncomfortable, I started doing more research. And I found that some of the information given to us was perhaps inaccurate. In fact, we were told the FAA had approved this. The truth being, the FAA had not approved this. That's not their role. Secondly, I went and listened to a recording of the Airport Commission or advisory board that was held later.
Mr. Hanselman, I'm sorry, but we're at the 3-minute mark now.
Sorry, we don't have any more time.
Emily DeHutt.
Thank you. I'm Emily DeHuff, a Newport resident and president of Friends of Lincoln County Animals, which runs the Pig of the Litter thrift store. First, I would like to give a shout out to the Central Coast Humane Society, the other and far more venerable animal welfare nonprofit in our area. Barbara Perry, the president of CCHS, is here today, and I believe one of her board members. I would like to mention that during the past 1.5 years, CCHS volunteers have been going every day to feed and provide water and shelter to cats left behind in the wildfire areas. And I've never seen such amazing dedication. Every day, for a year and a half, going up to 4 or 5 major streets that have been affected up there. And going, from house to house, lot to lot, looking for cats, trapping, getting them spayed and neutered, bringing them fresh food and water and comfort and knowledge that they were not abandoned. That is very touching, and I think the community needs to be aware of that service above and beyond. On the subject of the animal shelter site, I'm very pleased to see the commissioners pausing on looking at the airport site. We certainly want to be part of a vigorous and discreet search for a better location. We look forward to working with you on that. As I've talked to and heard from people in the community about this issue, I keep hearing 2 things that I don't have the answer to, and I would like the commissioners to address it if you would. Some people say, why can't the shelter be on the commons property? The main part of the commons property, not where it is now, but the part inside the fence where the old Pick of the Litter thrift store was and the crash building. The opinion has been expressed, and I tend to agree with it, that the community needs a good new animal shelter more than we need a multi-purpose event building. And I tend to agree with those who say that affordable housing is probably not the highest and best use of that property. I've heard that objection too, that we need to hold that out for housing. But the shelter would not be competing for residential properties. Commissioner Jacobson pointed out, residentially zoned property is not available, not suitable for the shelter anyway. So it seems there must be better places to put affordable housing. It might mean reopening the master plan, but I think it would be worth doing that and taking another look at whether the commons property might not be better. Also, I've heard a kind of a legend floating around about county-owned properties throughout the county, and why haven't they been looked at? I don't know that such properties really exist, but if they do, it would be good to let the public know why these things haven't been looked
Emily,
at.
we're at 3 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Were there any county properties that met the basic site criteria and were considered in the initial process, Commissioner?
I mean, the county does own properties scattered about here and there that we take in tax foreclosures, and there's also some we hold like for parks and things like that. So at the time, there was nothing that we held that met that criteria, and I can check back with property management. I try to kind of keep on top of that. There's nothing that comes to mind, but we can certainly look and see if there's anything that's coming up.
And as to the question of why not put the shelter on the main commons property? Well, simply at 6 acres, that's already by far the smallest fairgrounds site in the state. And people voted twice in room tax increase to support redevelopment of the commons. There have been multiple public processes that have addressed that. We're really only looking at a covered arena, a new animal barn, and the new exhibit hall. And in previous discussions, we didn't see a shelter fitting into that site, but we can always, before we move forward with the master plan, open that up one more time.
I think it might be wise to really look at what reopening the master plan would mean and the timeline for that process. So we had an approved master plan that was over the process of a couple of years. What does reopening that look like? Does that mean we go back through another 2-year process? And then,
No. Sorry.
well, but I think
I
that's a
understand the
question
question
we
you're
need to
raising.
answer. Because I can speak for myself and say that I am not interested in 2 years of going through a plan. I'd much rather be pursuing other options where we could be built in 2 years. But I think understanding what we would need to do to reopen that master plan. I've also, as you shared earlier, kind of heard that the northeast corner of that fairgrounds property next to where the shelter is now, but that is unbuildable because of a legal fill or some type of issue. So that's what I've heard, but I guess finding out if we have some substantiated information about that would be helpful. I've also heard that, let's see, if you cross Hardy Street and go the other direction, that some of that area, which is currently in the master plan as green space, may also be undevelopable. But again, I think understanding, that substantiated would be helpful in having that discussion.
Yeah, one thing that I can verify from conversations with the former County Public Works Director and Engineer Jim Beisman is that one challenge, in addition to large sections of that property that simply aren't suitable for development, and can really only be used as green space or possibly parking, is unlike what you would expect typically in a 6-acre site like this, the utility lines do not run along the edges of the property. That I imagine when the property was first developed, late 1930s, early 40s, they never envisioned a lot of development on that site. So basically, the utilities mostly crisscross the property in X's. So again, to add significantly, they've said there's room for the barn, room for the exhibit hall, we can cover the arena, but that we're gonna have to be very careful and very limited on placement of new buildings.
So I think that, just as if someone would call us today and said, hey, there's a site, somewhere to look at, and we would go through our due diligence of understanding what would be possible at that site, I think we should maybe direct our new staff to look at the same type of site evaluation we would go through with the fairgrounds. So, what would opening the master plan look like, what that process always would entail, and how long would it take? Is there this utility issue, moving those or whatever, what exactly would that entail, and have a kind of a concrete way to look at that and evaluate against it for the timeline and for the cost, just like we would any other site that we might look at.
Yeah, I don't want this to significantly delay the commons development. I mean, this process really began in 2007, which, 15 years ago, when we appointed the Blue Ribbon Committee, and based on the public input they heard, and, looking at project costs and funding, that staying on the current site was really the only visible, only viable site. And
You okay? You need some water or something?
I do.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we have had so much criticism through the years, frankly, of decisions made by past boards, not by ours, to carve up that property in little pieces. I would anticipate some public pushback if we tried to go that direction. Let's resume public comment. Gina McCrae.
I feel kind of a bit odd because I am so pleasantly surprised at the decision, the change, or at least this pause, because I'm Dan McCrae's sister. I've been working in opposition to this, but I still believe, since that was a pause, that was not a discontinuance, or that we're stopping this, I still feel the need to make some public comments, bring some things up, especially in the light of what Mr. Halseman said. He was right. The planning commission, we believe, was misled, as have been others, as have been myself. So I'm going to start real quick. I know I only have 3 minutes. When this first started, 2019, 2020, the newspaper said this was going to be away from, or near the airport, away from the runways. This was going to be in the southwest end of the airport. This property is located just a few hundred feet from that Coast Guard station at the extended approach departure end of that runway, where planes will be taking off and landing around 20 feet, 20 to 60 feet over this building. The runway's here, the building's here, there's 20 feet difference between me and that wall. That's how close these planes are. That's where this is going to be. It's going to be in the flight pattern. He started talking about the FAA. Oh, I also wanted, we had some accident reports here too. People said it. Have there been accidents there? Yes, there have. Here's accidents from the FAA at that site on runway 2, accidents. That ended up with planes out in bushes and stuff that had that plane, that building been there, there's a good chance that plane could have been up on that building. The last one was 2017. So this is not a long time ago. 99 years is a long time. 5 years ago is not. I have a letter here from the FAA. Everybody's been messed up. FAA approved this. The FAA did not approve this. This is from Ben, who's the airport planner at the FAA. The bolding in here is his input, not mine. And because of time, I'm going to read. He bolded. The FAA did not approve this project as we do not have the authority to do so. The FAA has not approved this. That's been misleading to that planning commission. Other areas that have been misleading, this is going to be soundproof. The soundproofing on this building was set up to protect the neighbors from the dogs, not the dogs from this aircraft. You cannot soundproof when dogs are outside. So you can put dogs in kennels outside and run military helicopters 50 feet over their head and call that a humane placement for these animals that have already been subject to enough. There's been misinformation, that there's been a lot of experts involved in this. There's been engineers, there's been all kinds of people out here, shelter planners, all kinds of people out here. Who's been out here? There's been no safety consulting firms out here. There was simply a section in a master plan that said you can do non-aeronautical use. There's been no veterinarians involved in this. I think that's because I think you all know what a veterinarian would say. In fact, I have right here a whole staff of from the Humane Society of veterinarians, behavioralists that say this would be cruel. This would be terrorizing to these animals. It's misleading to say that other airports do this. No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. There's 5,000 airports in the United States. They do not do that. Here's a list of what I was provided.
We're at 3 minutes.
Are we? Okay, thank you so much.
Wendy Engler.
Before she begins, Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
would Gina like to leave any of that documentation as public record for us?
I think we've already been provided a bit.
Do we have everything?
I'm happy to leave. Let's see what I got here.
Because I know we did get the FAA letter. Dan emailed it to us last night. And we've also received more than once the Oregon Humane Society letter. But if there's anything new in there, definitely we'll add it to the public record. Okay.
Excellent.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners Hall and Jacobson, Sheriff Landers, shelter staff, and everyone else. I want to thank the commissioners and the sheriff for their attention to this matter and being respectful to the public sentiment and pausing and pursuing the airport location. As with any project that involves both the city and the county, since the city was engaged with the lease, I think it gets confusing for the public. And it can be frustrating dealing with two different ruling bodies. City staff appears to have been eagerly pursuing this lease with the county, starting with the January 21st, 2020 meeting. And I and several other people were very interested. When it was first introduced at the January 21st, 2020, it's just a month or two before COVID restrictions began. At that council meeting, the public was told that the discussions on determining the site of the animal shelter were in the preliminary stages. Then nearly immediately thereafter at the meeting, the city council directed the city manager to begin negotiations on a lease with the county to locate the animal shelter at the airport. Beginning negotiations on a lease are far from beyond preliminary stages. And that was where I think the alarm went off with a lot of the public, is this was being pursued quite eagerly by the city. And there was a lack of transparency on how the site was selected, although the city was going to then get annual lease payments and a lot of infrastructure development. Then furthermore, the on-the-record hearing at the city council meeting on April 4th was very unfortunate, as there were maybe 20 or more people there. I don't know how many supported or wanted to present new information, but the on the record hearing made it a highly structured, limited opportunity for anyone to participate. And I think that the information that to the other people have presented can show that there were so many things that were not being considered, and it makes it very frustrating for the public. So I want to thank you for your consideration on this matter. I think, why not learn how to make an illegal fill work somehow, some way? Drive pilings or something. That site is going to be there and you'll have to deal with that illegal fill. But I would certainly be in favor of trying to make the old site work. But I will be on the lookout for anything else.
Okay, very
Thank you.
kind. Thanks for your input. Barbara Perry.
I'm Barbara Perry, the Central Coast Humane Society. Excuse me. I am hard to understand. I have damage to my tongue, so let me know if you can't understand it. First of all, thanks to Sheriff Landers and all of you for voting for a pause. I think it is well worth our time to take another look. I sold real estate for 7 years, so I've contacted a couple of people I worked with, and they are looking for property. One texted me in the meeting here, so I don't know what she has, but she's been in real estate 40 years, so I'm hoping she can help present some alternatives. We'll be meeting some of our concerns, and I think you will receive a copy of that from me. So I just wanted to say thank you. We would very much like to be involved in this process. We have supported the shelter from the beginning. So I just wanted to bring out the Humane Society's willingness to help and cooperate and do all that we can. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for their input today. At this time, we are scheduled to move into an executive session under ORS 192.660, 660, parentheses D, regarding labor negotiations. And do we anticipate returning to public session?
We do not.
Okay, so at this point, we need to clear the room of everybody except
Can we take a
commissioners and
5-minute
staff.
recess?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
sure.